Hello.
I'm in roller and waterworks.
Great, thank you. Just getting set up here. Hi.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I'm Jerry. Right, yeah.
Great. You know these guys then, I'm so sure.
Not at all. Stop loss,
You're even for quite a week now.
I haven't been out there. We never developed about that.
You get
Oh, thank you for doing the audit.
good.
I was like, like 4 certifications in Korea and India, and they're just like,
Yeah.
I'm ready to cry.
Test.
We hear you, Albie. We don't see you though.
No, not yet.
So Gary and Don.
And it's only you and me.
Webcam. Yeah.
How you doing?
Okay.
I've been traveling with most of work, so.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. He roped Gary into joining the board.
Do my son on Taylor Lake and
Or maybe I. Well, I always exaggerate so that when it actually hits, you're just kind of like, oh.
That's okay. Yeah, talking about the scout, actually, you reminded me,
I feign tears in the corner.
Association Scouts Canada contacted me and they want to chat about our submission. So that's a good sign.
That's great.
They want to talk.
And with Scouts here, I've actually worked with the learning coordinators. We've got one session, one field leader session scheduled for September, and second session.
Well, I've got a key to the building.
For Scout
I
leaders.
don't have a key to
So
the
I've
board.
So maybe we'll get in with the Scouts eventually.
Well,
Unless
of course we will. It just,
key
it's
and
the
I
same
just have
everywhere,
to
right? It just
try it.
seems slow. You know, you talk and you talk and you talk and then something, and then suddenly do it.
I mean, I think that the local council has some
Access our
challenges
office,
with
yeah.
resources and number of people. I think they've shown.
No,
really
I
got
do not have a key to
the
the
number of
board.
folks that used to have a training group, but they.
What has been a lot of times they lost the sense of their
Yeah, Gardner, yeah, well, they,
ordinance, financial reasons in the flood and
We have
And then
2
there was
keys,
the
2
whole
fobs.
thing we don't talk about.
Yeah.
The keys are both for the hub.
Is Catherine the one you were expecting?
Yes.
Okay,
Hi,
she's on.
Catherine.
She probably can't hear you from my computer because I'm muted.
Right.
So she
Okay.
could hear you from yours.
Hi, Catherine. We see that you have arrived.
She's muted right now.
Oh, how do I unmute?
Oh, no, I hear you. You're not muted.
Okay, there we go.
But you're very quiet. So, I mean, I don't know that you're going to get any opportunities to talk too much, Catherine, but if there are questions, there might be questions that only you can answer. So then we will definitely ask you to speak.
Super.
I'm still kind of setting everything up here. And one thing I will be asking you once I've got it set up, keep asking me, use new hardware. Okay. Do you want to try talking again and see if I can hear you properly?
She's muted right now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you saw this, that came out with the press release
Not
this
anymore.
morning today about the
Yeah.
new stores.
Yeah.
And we're down on the list. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I had maybe the volume too low. Try again.
Hello, how you doing?
Now we got you. Yeah, my computer
Good.
doesn't make much sound unless I connect it to a speaker. But great. Folks are just collecting here. You know how it is. We're always late. And probably what you see right now is like half a body with a thumb over it. Is that what you're seeing on your screen?
Actually, I'm not seeing anything except for the title, Outdoor Literacy Town Hall. That's it.
Oh,
It just says wait to view.
And you're not screen sharing.
okay. So there you go. So camera. No, that's,
There you go.
people can see.
Oh,
Okay, something's about to happen there.
Yeah, you're sharing your screen right now. So we see your internet GoToMeeting.
Okay, if I turn that off, then, in fact, I'm mostly just going to put the slideshow up, Catherine, so that's actually what
okay.
you will see once I get that going, which is a lot more attractive than looking at me. Okay, so actually I've turned the cam off and I've got the screen on.
There it is.
Look at that.
I see it. Yep.
Alistair's not here, huh? Quite a few people said they were going to come, including one Alistair who was going to do a quick presentation ahead of. All kinds of things happening here now. Right. If that doesn't show up, I will begin with what I've got. No, that worked well. Now I've got a blank screen. Oh. There we go.
Just thinking.
All right. Seems like it's working properly. Hi.
Hi, it's Top Along, Alistair Ferguson.
Hi, Alistair. Did you want to do a presentation
Yeah,
to begin,
I'd rather-
or do you want
I'd
to do it
rather-
at the end, or?
I'll go right at the end, let you
Okay.
go and do your stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So why are we hopping along, Alistair?
It's the after effects of a replacement left hip when I've got excruciating agonizing muscular pain,
That
which I
sounds
didn't
fun.
have when I got my right hip done 4 years ago. So I'm not a happy camper.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine not. I hope they haven't screwed up on you.
I hope not.
Yeah, no kidding.
Actually, I'll
I
sit.
was gonna say, like,
Yeah,
come
I'll
sit
sit
next
closer.
to me.
Thank you.
All the way down there.
I started shoveling them over and then I was like, oh, he wants to go all the way. Maybe I smell, I did bike.
So we'll give folks just another 5 minutes to show, and then we'll begin. I know there's other people who said they were going to come, but you know how it is. It's summer and it's hoping.
It's a beautiful
nice
summer's
day.
evening. Why would you
First
sit
summer's
indoors
evening
for
that
a
it's
boring
not
meeting?
raining. My timing was off. Also, people got to find the place and that sort of thing. Adds the challenge.
Are you recording, by the way?
Thanks for reminding me. No, I'm not. So, going. All right. So,
The projector is having a meeting.
okay. So we need to record. Oh no, this session is being recorded. I guess I must.
It is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, GoToMeeting? Yeah, it's, basically you can access it anywhere. Same as Meeting Pro.
You can show your desktop
Oh, yeah.
documents.
All right.
This is really not necessary for the Canberra Conference Committee.
No, but it mirrors a lot of what Mike's setting up with that. Or whatever it is.
My party.
Yeah, WordPress has a widget that's the same as kind of like a dumbed down version of Meeting Pro or Cisco GoToMeeting, anything.
That's something that we, part of our service. What we're getting.
What a wimpy excuse.
Yeah, that's the.
Says he's not coming because his girlfriend's dog's having her 13-year-old dog put down and suddenly got sick. What kind of an excuse is that? That's too bad. Stuart is good value.
I was amazed. I almost got all of my action items done all day this morning. So many action items from so many boards that could not have just formed another one.
Try not to offer your services to do something that will take you longer than 5 minutes.
That's about where I'm at now.
Okay, let's just begin anyway. I know we've had a little bit of discussion about who we are, so but maybe we can just introduce ourselves. We'll start with Franz here, and we'll just do that first of all, and then as I said, I'm going to give a bit of a presentation. So we'll give a presentation, and then we'll have a discussion as to where that might take us.
Howdy, I'm Franz. I work with LB as the curriculum specialist for the Outdoor Council of Canada. And yeah, worked in the outdoors for several years. But anything else you want to know?
Franz has come in from his summer holidays to help out tonight. Thank you, Franz. Franz is a star, committed to the cause.
Thank you.
My name is Christina Pickles. I'm the program manager for the Alberta Council for Environmental Education.
My name is Matt Steele. I work for the Outdoor Center here, working for the paddling department.
Kelly McDonald, also part of the OCC, also actively involved with Scouts Canada as a scout.
Ben Bowers with Calgary Ski Club. I'm Gary Millard with Bike Calgary and also general outdoor enthusiast, mountain runner, skier, paddler.
Moeller with Waterworks Sky Club.
Don Hollingshead with the Elbow Valley Cycle Club and Bike Calgary.
Kimberly Nelson with Bike Calgary, Canada Bikes, Walk Calgary, and soon to be the Vision Zero Calgary Society.
Good. And what is that?
We are setting up our own Vision Zero in Calgary because City Council is afraid to do it.
Okay, so this is zero emissions, zero, yeah. Okay.
Oh, zero fatalities.
Oh, zero fatalities, okay.
Not zero vision. No more murders.
Yeah.
I'm Alistair Ferguson, and I'm a long-time member of the Calgary Ski Club, and for the past number of years I've looked after cross-country skiing at Shaganappy Golf Course as the track setter there, principal, and also the Lake Louise Loppet at Lake Louise, and working on improving the cross-country trails at Lake Louise. So I'm somewhat of an expert on cross-country ski trail design, construction, operations, ski areas, risk management, and generally, fortunately, I was still able last winter to drive a snowmobile and observe and supervise, whereas I certainly could not ski, unfortunately.
That's too bad.
Oh, excuse me.
Hi, just in time to introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm Doug McCullough with the Elbow Valley Bike Club.
Great. Hi. And you have to introduce yourself to the crowd too.
Okay. It's Kevin Baggett.
Thanks, Karen. I'm sorry to call cock-use who walks in the door. You look terrified there for a moment. We were just finished introducing ourselves. Actually, the one person who's not introduced themselves is me. And I know I've just started to get to know a few of you just over the last few weeks through contact. Some of you I know quite well. Some of you might not have met me before. I used to work here at the Outdoor Center for 18 years. But now I work with the Outdoor Council of Canada. I moved across last year as a full-time position. My area of expertise is I'm a mountain guide, so sort of mountain world of climbing and skiing and so on is I suppose my original area of expertise. but I programmed at the Outdoor Centre for a long time, so I have a lot of programming experience. And I've been working for the Outdoor Council of Canada since it got formed. Actually, it occurs to me that the Outdoor Council of Canada was formed in this room about, and what you can work it out, it was November 23rd, I believe, 2008. So, and it's in that sort of role at the Outdoor Council of Canada that I ended up trying to get this project moving forward. So just a little bit about the Outdoor Council of Canada. It was formed in response to the Strathcona and Tweedsmuir accident and the Lost Coast Trail accident, which, as I think we all know, results in a huge contraction in the ability of kids to get outside through school programs. So the Outdoor Council of Canada was formed to recognizing it seemed like the world was closing in on outdoor activities to try and create some sort of national umbrella group that would push back and turn that around and move us towards a more outdoor world for education and for activity. So tonight we think we're here for activity, I think primarily rather than education. I might suggest otherwise a little bit later on in my presentation here, but we are both education and activity, so that would be teaching math outdoors as well as cross-country skiing or whatever. Since that time, the main thing that we do and that our bread and butter is we recognized there was a chronic extreme shortage of outdoor leaders, feeling confident to take other people outdoors anymore. So we developed and along with that, the risk management side is principals would say to a teacher who said, I want to take my kids out, what qualifications do I have? And the teacher would say none. And the principal would say, or the risk manager would say, well, then you can't take the kids. So we've developed a certification it's an entry-level certification at basically 2 days with some pre-course reading to give people basic training in leading others outside. That's not skills-based, it's around the soft skills of leadership. I'd like to just introduce Kurt, who used to be my boss, without whom the Outdoor Council would not have existed because the Outdoor Council was supported very much so on my ability to work for the Outdoor Centre, get paid by the Outdoor Centre, but actually work for the Outdoor Council of Canada. And Kurt covered my back for many years before I moved out of here. And literally the Outdoor Council would not have happened but for that support. So thanks, Kurt. So that's our bread and butter, but we recognize that there's a lot more to getting people active outdoors. We also recognize that if we're going to get people active outdoors, most people live in cities, so where it needs to happen is in the cities. And that's something that sometimes when we talk about outdoor activity, people think I mean, whitewater kayaking or skiing some big avalanche slope or climbing Everest or something. And actually, in reality, most of what we envisage the work for the Outdoor Council is encouraging activity in the city. And it might be biking to school or work. It might be going for a walk in the evening. It might be walking to the store to buy your milk instead of driving to the store to buy your milk, etc. Or cross-country skiing on Shagnappy Golf Course and many other places in the city. So that took me, I ended up becoming aware that the Sport Calgary policy was up for renewal. I went to a meeting where one of the input meetings, I got to know Catherine, who's, in fact, I think it was through Catherine that I became aware that, Catherine, by the way, there's one more person here. I've got to have you introduce yourself. Catherine, please introduce yourself, because you're looking small and black. I actually didn't notice you there.
Hi. Hi, I'm Catherine from Calgary. and thanks for letting me join this way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Catherine works for Sport Calgary, which is an organization to advise Calgary on sport. It's, as I understand, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, it's primarily funded by the city of Calgary, but it's intended to be separate from the city, so they don't report to the city, they report to a separate board. And then also talking to the staff in the city. Stuart was supposed to be here tonight, but his girlfriend's dog is alas, shuffling off this mortal coil. So he won't be able to be here. And Shelley, another person I've dealt with at the city, is unfortunately on holiday, which is very inconsiderate of her. So that's me, that's the Outdoor Council of Canada. So I'm going to just, our agenda for this evening. First thing I'm going to do is talk about physical literacy, and I know that some of you will be familiar with physical literacy. Some of the room will not be familiar, and depending on where you've got your information from, you might have a different views of physical literacy. So I think it would be good to review what I understand about physical literacy and also why I think this opens a door for our community to get a much more support from the city. Having said that, I am not, and this goes for the whole presentation, if you think I'm full of stuff, then just let me know, or if you disagree or whatever, or if you've got something to add that I've missed, then, we're here together as a group. It's an opportunity to act, for us to sort of form a bit of a community. So that means feel free to ask questions, butt in, whatever needs to be done. I'm going to talk about the role then. Once we talk about physical literacy, generally look at the role that what I'm calling non-competitive outdoor activity might have role to play in developing physical literacy in people. And I'm going to move that on to what I'm going to call outdoor literacy. What would it look like if we developed outdoor literacy? And then the case for integrating what I'm calling sport and non-competitive outdoor activity. And sport is one of those things that you can't nail to the wall with a definition. So for tonight, we're going to think about sport as being competitive activity. So that obviously includes cross-country skiing can be sport, right? And kayaking can be sport. But I'm really thinking about when there's sport, and then on the other side, there's that stuff we do that's not really aimed at competing, although competition sneaks in from time to time when I'm riding my bike home, and some young sprat has the audacity to overtake me, but not fast enough that I think I can catch him or her. And I think then I want to look at what we can learn from sport, because I think, we've seen that sport has been fantastically successful in getting the public's attention and getting the public's support. What can we learn from sport that we can harness for ourselves to get to become a full partner in physical literacy promotion? I'm going to look at some possible strategies that I've thought about, but you guys might have some other or better ideas. And then after that, we'll have a group discussion, and then we'll see what people think there's something to move forward on here. How are we actually going to make the next steps to do that? Okay. Physical literacy, the big name in physical literacy is a woman called Margaret Whitehead from Great Britain. She's actually a philosopher by training. So hers is a philosophical approach to the idea of movement, which is a very interesting approach. She argues that we have what is called an embodied mind. So what would it be not to have an embodied mind? It would be if we had a body and it was kind of a mind stuck in it, like a computer stuck in the head. And that's the way we used to think about the mind and the body. The mind was somehow separate and above and superior to the body. And she's saying, no, that's not what it is at all. We have a mind because we have a body, and our mind is, and our body is one continuum. And this used to be an airy-fairy idea 100 years ago, resisted by many people. In fact, even 30, 40 years ago, I was reading quite recent papers, less than that, 20 years ago, I was reading papers that were written 40 years ago that were still pushing back against the idea that we might have an embodied mind. These days, there's really no argument here. We have a mind because it's in the body. And that has some interesting consequences because we have a relationship to the environment. We learn as we grow. And Margaret Whitehead argues that physical activity is essential for proper physical and psychological development for kids, and then as we age, for the maintenance of our health, both physically and psychologically. We need to keep moving. There's a process there, and this is all very philosophical, but it is evidence supported. What we see now is what research tells us. And so when we think about it, if we're physically active, we're less likely to get dementia as an adult, for instance. If we are physically active, we're less likely to get disease. We also know that people who are physically active are more likely to experience outward social mobility during their life because they're more productive, they're more creative. They come to work more often. That's handy if you want to get promoted. So it's not crazy speak. This is pretty much accepted within the sport community now. So the sport community, I would say, is in the process of changing in a lot of ways, so that it's attempting to integrate physical literacy into the sport community. At least many members of them are. And I think, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the sport community is on a continuum from those that are still in denial and those that are working very hard to see.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Oh, good, I'm not wrong. I make these assumptions about other people and I don't know it's true. But thank you, Catherine. And at the end of this, the more physically literate you are, the more likely you are to be active. So, I mean, that's the core message here. Literacy, just like if you can read better, you're more likely to read. If you can't read very well, it becomes overwhelming and we stop reading. So the same for physical literacy. The more literate you are, the more likely to be active. So we can put this in a number of forms, but one thing that Margaret White has done is to create a sort of 3 buckets in which we can throw the human experience, if you like, or physical literacy, not the human experience, but physical literacy itself. One of them is our motivation, our attitudes and beliefs about physical activity. Okay, and then the next one is the environment in which we exist, and there's this dynamic relationship between the environment, and that's all the environment. I'm not necessarily about the green environment. I mean everything that's outside of ourselves. We're in this dynamic relationship with which we learn, and we learn through movement. And some things we can really only learn through movement, right? The only reason I know how much effort to put into this to lift it up is because I've lifted up many similar such things, and it's a learned memory for me through movement. And then the third part of the bucket would be skills and knowledge. So if we're talking about physical activity, then obviously to be a cross-country skier, you need to know how to put on a pair of skis. You need to know you need the physical skills of movement. You need to know how to dress for the outdoor world. You need to know where to go. So you need to know you've got this relationship with the environment. Where can I go cross-country skiing, etc. So these things are all related to each other. And one of the interesting things is that the more you've got of one thing in these buckets, the more likely you are to have the other one. So if you think about it, you're more motivated, then you're more likely to find out about where you can go cross-country skiing. And the more you go cross-country skiing, then the more likely you are to get, it creates that self-confidence and that belief in yourself. So self-efficacy is in there too as one of the beliefs. You're more likely to go cross-country skiing. And then, of course, the more you ski, the better your skills get to be. So if you're deficient in one of these areas, and unfortunately this is a huge area of deficiency for a lot of people, okay? So just to sort of look forward a bit, I think what we see with sport is really good at knowledge and skills. They've been good at delivering this for a very long time at a very, very high level. As far as their part of the environment, they're typically concerned about facilities. So they're really good at making sure they've got high quality facilities and what that looks like and fighting for that. And then, of course, there's the motivation, attitudes, and beliefs. And I would say that in that department, sport is mixed. The fact that most people drop out of sport suggests they're not doing a good job of creating the types of motivation to keep people active for life. But having said that, there's pockets of super excellence within sport in that area too. So it's a continuum. Would you agree, Catherine, or am I off base?
No, you're right on base.
Good. Doing good so far. It's interesting that I think a lot of people here will relate to the fact that traditionally there can be a bit of a divide between outdoor active people and the sport community. And so maybe we don't understand each other as well as we should. Some things that come out of this is, first of all, people need diverse experiences to be physically active. So it's not necessarily the case that what works for one person is going to work for another person. And then also, we ourselves need different things at different times. So we might want to play soccer when we're 15 or 25. We might want to be a backcountry skier when we're 35. And we might not want to do anything. My 87-year-old mother-in-law is not interested in either of those two things, but she does want to be able to walk to the store every day to get her groceries. So she needs a wide range of different attributes to be physically active for life. And really important that physical literacy is something everyone can have. So it's according to our capacity. So I mean, if you're a paraplegic and you don't have use of your legs, well, there's certain things that you're not going to be able to do, but you can still be physically active to the extent that you can be. And in reality, all of us have differing abilities anyway. There's a few things I never could have been. I never could have been a power weightlifter. I never could have been a sprinter. Those are just not attributes I have, but I can still run to my level of ability. So it's not about, to be physically literate is not about being the best. It's about being what you can be. And then an idea of universality. Everyone can be physically literate. And I put the word should in there because I personally think that if we don't give people the opportunity to be physically literate, then they've missed out. To me, it's kind of a human right to be able to be physically literate. So, and those are things I'll come back to, that idea of universality, diversity, and capacity. So, outdoor literacy, those three things there. What does outdoor literacy look like? Well, I think that we need to be able to enjoy outdoor activities in all weather seasons, and that we choose to participate regularly and be resilient to setbacks. So, in other words, we know how to do it, and we want to do it, and we actually do it, even when things don't necessarily work out great, right? So the weather's bad, or I fell last time I went cross-country skiing, or whatever. That doesn't put me off. I've got a deep well of resilience. I can move forward to do that. I think that, so that, in the motivation area, in the environmental area, I think our environment needs to be a much richer. I think it's part of who we are. Our resource is the environment in a very broad sense. And so we need to be environmentally aware and knowledgeable, not just about, remembering the knowledgeable, and also not knowledgeable about how we can use that environment in a responsible way, etc., and nurture that environment. So I think that's a much richer view of environment than we see in most sporting activities. Not all, but most sporting activities. And then we need a whole bunch of knowledge and skills. Obviously, knowing how to dress. I think I can share with the room. I think we all agree when you watch people in wintertime stood at the bus stop, it seems like a lot of people hate winter for a really good reason. They don't know how to dress properly for it. We need to have certain safety skills if we're going to move outside the city, or indeed in the city. I mean, I ride a bike to work, and those of you that do know that you need actually a very high level of ability about being safe as a cyclist in the city if you want to make it a long career. We need to have fundamental movement skills. We need to know how to walk. I believe that to be truly outdoor literate, there's sort of fundamental skills that we should be making sure everyone's got. So walking, people should know how to walk and hike. And actually people don't. I don't know if you've noticed that, but people don't necessarily know that very simple skill at a high enough level. Cross-country skiing, I think, is a fundamental. I think we should know how to do stuff on water, paddling. And I think we also need to know how to do things in the city. So urban biking, I put up there, but also walking in the city is also a skill. Okay, and it's partly because we could make it easier if we had a better facility for walking in the city. We maybe need to start thinking about the city as being our facility, and how do we make it better. I think we also need teamwork and social skills to be outdoor active. I think that comes along with it. We need people to do it with. For most people anyway, and so having that ability to be sociable. And there's probably some other things you can put in there, but I want to carve off that idea. There's something called outdoor literacy, and frankly, how do I know most people don't have it? What do you think? How do I know most people are not outdoor literate? Because they're not doing stuff outdoors, right? If they were outdoor literate, they would by in the sort of definition I put out there, they'd be being outdoor active. Physical literacy and outdoor activity, diverse experiences. How does outdoor activity fit in there? People are fundamentally different. Likely in this room, we would have quite a different set of personality profiles than if this was a competitive sport meeting. In fact, things like introvertism tends to be a little bit higher in the outdoor active world, for instance. People are different, so they need different things. I know that a lot of people, especially girls, do not like contact sports very much. Some people don't like to be in competitive situations. They prefer other types of situations. We need diverse experiences so people can find what works for them. And then we also need diversity because as we age, there's a pattern, as I've already alluded to, in our activity. We start out with much more vigorous activities. We're probably much more comfortable with bumping around, playing soccer. That doesn't hurt so much when you're a little rubber ball. It hurts quite a bit when you're my age. I'm not so keen on it. And certainly by the time you're my mother-in-law's age, that type of thing is completely impossible. So And then also, you know, we might do one thing for a while, and we might do another thing for a while. It's just a matter of interest, what grabs my interest. We get bored with things. According to our capacity, it's really important that these things be inclusive. And a lot of physical activity, as we know, has not been inclusive. The typical route for most kids is they get involved in something, they don't keep up with the crowd, they drop out of it, and then they have nowhere else to go. So that's a big challenge for us to overcome. And I think that outdoor activities are naturally it's much easier to make them inclusive for folks. There's an essential role for collaborative versus competitive experiences. Not that competitive experiences are not good, but we also need collaborative teamwork experiences. Both of them have value, and I think we excel in the idea of in collaborative type activities. Much easier for us to arrange in an outdoor environment. Universality, only 7% of children and 15% of Canadian adults are adequately physically literate. In other words, reaching the minimum level of physical activity recommended by Health Canada. Another way of putting that is that 85% of adults and 93% of Canadians are not active enough. So those are pretty big statistics. Interesting enough, Norway, for adults, I don't know what it is for kids, but for adults, 30% of Norwegians are meeting the Canadian minimum guidelines of physical activity, so twice as many. And we all know that Norway is an outdoor active place. So if we can add outdoor activity to sport, we can make a huge difference in these things, although it's a long road. So I think in terms of reaching that gap, non-competitive outdoor activity. So that's why I think we have a big role to play if we can find a way of working more collaboratively with sport and getting the support we need as a result. So just to say this one more time, it's a continuum between, like I've talked about, there's these two different things. I think we need to start thinking about sport and non-competitive activity as being continuum. And in fact, at times we do get competitive. You know, as I say, I ride my bike, I get competitive. Frankly, my mother-in-law is competitive with the other people in her senior zone because she walks more than they do. You know, it's there. You know, we might pretend it's not, but it is there. You know, she takes pride in that. That's a great thing. So it's a continuum from obviously the Olympics at one end, taking the dog for a walk at the other end. There's a continuum in there. If we look at it like that, maybe it makes it a little bit easier for us to see how we might work together. It's worth pointing out that the sport community is working hard to address inclusion and universality in sport. So this is part of sport's attempt to come to terms with the physical literacy literature and what it means. So I know that there's discussions in the city. There's some initiatives ongoing. There's actually one being led out of Active Living. There's a multi-sport program in Cochrane. I'm aware of another multi-sport program that's happening within, or we hope it's going to happen within the school system at some point. So there's this idea of multi-sport, and in multi-sport is the idea for kids to be involved in many different sports and hopefully be able to move from one to another, which is a little bit of a new way of doing things. So that obviously creates a much stronger base of physical skills amongst the kids and knowledge skills, but hopefully makes it more likely for them to stay in it because it's more interesting. High Five is an organization that's worth looking into. They're really into creating supportive structures for kids to be physically active. A couple of things that I've learned from them is their research shows that kids that stay active, they stay active because they have a buddy to stay active with, so they've got friends that they go with to do something. They have a supportive adult, so there's an adult in that organization that's personally supportive of what they're doing. And then the other last thing, of course, is the obvious thing. It's fun for them. If they're having fun, they'll keep doing it. So High Five is a great organization out of Ontario that's growing really fast. I think we can add what they do to what we do at the Outdoor Council to make something even better. The physical literacy, I think, opens the door to outdoor activity being part of that broad spectrum and getting the support that, frankly, we've not got in the past. But theoretically, like it's there in the philosophy, the trick is how do we actually make it happen? And then, you know, what we're looking at here, if we're going to make it happen. Sorry, someone?
Sorry, I have a question. I'll forget it probably if I wait till the end, but Well, how does high five work? What is it? How does it work? I'm not familiar.
So high five training, and I haven't been able to take it, unfortunately, is to train volunteer leaders and professional leaders to deliver sport in the high five way. So it's to use your coaching or whatever it is you're doing in the group to make sure that it's fun, to focus much more on fun than some of the other things that have traditionally been focused on. Make sure that there's a good group dynamic so every kid in the group feels included. So yeah, around supporting individual kids, making sure they've got friends, trying to create a very positive social environment. I've not done the training. I taught to high five. I taught the person that's the LJ, who's the sort of principal there, and she's explained to me you can get the training from WinSport. It's offered. It hasn't ever been offered when I work on weekends a lot. I never seem to be able to make it to a course, but it's not that expensive, and it's offered a lot. So it is about just trying to create, if I may be rude about sport is famous for being, come on, you sissy, get moving. The kid that's the most competitively successful gets all the ice time, gets all the glory. The kid that's the klutz gets pushed out of the way. So high five is about pushing back against that to create more of a community in sport. And I think it works really well, particularly for community sport versus, I think that's where it's having most of its inroads. But Catherine, maybe you can give me more information on that. Do I sort of have it right, do you think? Do you have more you could say about that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of combinations going on now between high five and a lot of other physical literacy training to go along with it. So they actually go into some evaluation and as well as promotion of what the best ways to promote physical literacy are if you want to call it the high five way. But high five is very, very common now for municipalities to train their camp workers and things like that. Anybody working with children.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot more depth to it than I've just explained. But yeah, exactly. So that's great. So it's a system of doing things in a more community way, more inclusive way for sure. So I just put up this. This is something you can pull off the Sport for Life website. They talk about physical literacy from cradle to grave. So they've got this sort of building of basic physical skills down here. Excellence. Some people go into the excellent stream, some competitive. And over here it's recreational physical activity. And we all know that actually these two triangles are like just a tiny side here. Most people are up on this side. So this is really the realm. This idea of recreational physical activity, if you like, is there's a huge need here for us to step into it. But I think in the past we haven't really had what it needed to step into it. We've got to be able to provide as well as observe the what needs to be done. So I just want to look at what, and you push back on me here. This is my observations. I haven't read this anywhere. I'll look at what I think makes sport work. Why is sport so successful? Because let's face it, Sport Canada gets $200 million a year to do what it does. And I don't know how much the city spends. I haven't asked, but it certainly gets a lot of money to support sport, and that's good. I mean, sport's a good thing. It's not that we shouldn't be providing that kind of support, but we'd like to get a little support too. So why is it they can do that and we haven't been able to do it? The trick is not to be pissed at them for getting it, but to figure out how they do it and join them in that process, I would suggest. So the first thing is it has a product, right? It's very clear to the public. You sign up for soccer lessons, you know what you're getting, or rugby lessons, or fencing lessons, or join a team, or whatever. It's definitely a product that the public can identify with very strongly as something they want to do or they want a child to do. They're highly organized. It's the very nature of sport. I mean, you can't have a soccer team unless you've got some organization of some kind. And to organize a soccer league is the next step up. So it has to be highly organized. And so there's typically some professionals who are getting paid, but there's also a whole army of volunteers behind them. We shouldn't underestimate the extent to which sport runs on an army of volunteers. So there's this whole organization, and so this meeting is maybe about how we can start to build some organization too. And then the last thing is they control the message. you pick up the paper, there's 3 or 4 pages of sport every single day in the paper, and it's on the radio and it's on the TV, and the message is controlled. I don't mean that in a negative way. They're just constantly sending out good messages about sport, and we all know that our world is not very good at that. The message gets controlled for us. People are scared of bears because all they ever hear about hiking in the backcountry is when someone gets eaten by a bear. So those things, and then those things also work together, right? The more you control the message, the more you can shape the idea of the product in the public's mind, the more you can get resources to be organized. And so there's this very strong sort of, and I want to use the word symbology, that's not what I meant. It's kind of an ecosystem there that supports itself. That works really well. And we're going to need something like that if we really want to push outdoor activity, I would suggest, in our own way, to the extent we can do it. So I think what we can learn from it is we need to do something like that. And then once we figure that out, how we can, how can we exploit that sort of model that they've got. And I'd also say, what can we contribute to the model? Because I've already alluded to the fact that I think we do some things better than sport does. So we shouldn't see this as what can we get so we can get our piece of the pie, but rather how can we join the overall physical activity community in a more constructive way where we can actually maybe provide some things that they could do better at, or we could help them in some ways. And we have some strengths. If I look at divide those 3 things up, the product, the organization, and the messaging, in the context of physical literacy, what strengths are there that we have? One is with diversity. We attract a different crowd of people than sport does. We're inherently attractive to a lot of people for whom sport is not particularly attractive. So there's a whole market out there waiting for us if only we can latch into it. We are, I think, much more inclusive. I think it's much easier to keep people who don't have any particular great skill of what we're doing in it, and make a community for them to exist in. I think that's inclusivity is easier for us to manage overall. I think collaboration comes naturally between participants themselves. I certainly see that working at the Outdoor Center. It's amazing. You bring in a bunch of kids into the climbing wall, and you watch them climb, and there's some kid scampers to the top, and everyone goes, oh yeah, he does that all the time. And then you see another kid that gets halfway up, and everyone is like clapping, and like totally genuinely, it's nothing, not forced at all. It's a much more supportive environment, and it just seems to happen naturally. Same thing hiking, people are willing to help each other out to make the day work. I think we're much better, and certainly I would say that sort of participant-centeredness, supporting individuals, I think there's pockets of supreme excellence in the outdoor world. When we think about things like Outward Bound and stuff like that, I think we have a lot of skills in that area that are really quite superior that we can exploit. Organizational collaboration, that's what we need to put together. It's not what we've got right now, but can we build on our strengths maybe to collaborate a little better than we have in the past to get what we need. And then in the environment itself, we have a lot of facility space. And there's a huge issue right now in the city with facilities. There's not enough facilities for the existing sports. So we have a lot of facility out there that's pretty much unused. Well, we can't just trample it down. We have to use it wisely, but it's there for us to use. That's not to ignore the fact that we also have facility which is of extremely poor quality that needs to be better, and I'm thinking about our streets in this regard. Or indeed cross-country facilities in the city could be so much better than they are. But certainly there's a lot ready for that. And then also the connection to that wider environment is unique. It's not unique to us, but it's strongly part of outdoor activity by definition. And I think that's really attractive to people. I think there's a lot of interest in the environment these days. People want to be out in nature. So, I think we have a lot of potential things that we can put into our product. And then we also have our own specific set of skills and knowledge that we need to transmit. We're not taking up too much time. I've been talking for a long time. In terms of organizations, do we have some strengths? I think so. That we do have people are willing to volunteer. All our organizations, I think everybody in this room, first of all, you're volunteering to be here tonight, but everyone here also volunteers in the sport they're in, and there's a whole bunch of people in your organizations too. So we certainly have volunteers that we can work with. I think we have a collaborative culture generally, and I think we need to build on that. In terms of weaknesses, we have no paid organization or very little paid organization. So in terms of that stuff that sports got, we are like so far behind that we need to do something about that. If we're going to move what I'm suggesting tonight onwards, at some point we're going to have some people that actually get paid to do the nuts and bolts, the clerical work of getting people registered and putting together promotion and all that sort of thing that goes on with an organization. We also have a tremendous shortage of leadership capacity. So we do have some tools. The Outdoor Council has a training tool. It's not complete in and of itself, but obviously we have within cross-country skiing, for instance, we have people who are able to teach others the necessary skills that they can teach other people. But there's a lot of work to be done, right? If we were trying to get every kid in Calgary cross-country skiing, we don't have the capacity to do that right now. So there's certainly work that needs to be done in that area, but we can see how we might do it. Something weird happened to my order there. Oh, I see. Sorry, I went up one. And then message. What about our strengths? That last bit around messaging. The appeal of the great outdoors is a very sort of romantic vision that Canadians share in spades, and that's great. How can we build on that? There is, I think, a rising tide of interest in outdoor activity, and I see that everywhere. I see it. Would you agree, Kurt? In the outdoor center, it's just. And it's across all cultures too. It's not just the traditional middle-class white people. It's also, which actually is this room right now, I noticed, but that's not surprising. We're leaders in the industry, but we're seeing lots of people from other groups too. So there is a lot of interest. We'll talk about getting physically active, and people are saying, you know, I'm 40 and I don't want to play soccer in a sport. I don't see myself keeping fit that way, and I hate the gym. And that really only leaves outdoor activity. So I think there is a lot of people who are willing, if we give them a way, to get involved. And there's a lot of people that want to become connected to the environment. I think there's a growing interest in that area, right? You think? I think so. And then the whole thing around sustainable cities is, you know, like it's a big talk here in Calgary, it's a big talk everywhere. It's something that we have to do. The talk is not going to stop because there's some people who think that that's all airy-fairy hippie stuff. It's not going to stop because it's real. And sustainable cities in part mean getting out of your car and walking and cycling. There are other things, but that's part of it. So I think we have a lot of wins going our way if we can harness them. And I don't think a lot of these things were going our way 10, 15 years ago when the last sport policy was written. And then the whole idea of lifelong activity, like it's being pushed. To be frank, when I look at the literature, sedentary behavior is a much bigger health threat than obesity. There's no question about it. Look at the health effects of the two. There's all this talk about weight. In point of fact, physical activity is what people need to be paying attention to. That's where the big healthcare costs are. So there's going to be more talk about that. It's a harder case to sell because although we can see what weight people are by looking at them, we've got the fashion industry and Hollywood and all that kind of stuff that pushes that industry, and it's harder to see whether someone's physically active or not. But it's really, it is an important health issue, and I think it's not really reached the tipping point in the public consciousness. Maybe it has for some people, but not across the whole of society. But it's going to get there soon. So our weaknesses, well, we know what the big one is, the lack of control over risk, the risk messaging, the idea that these activities are too dangerous to do. And so we absolutely have to be able to push back against that. And then the other one is Calgary, not just Calgary, but Canada has an indoor culture, frankly. We know that. People don't want to be outside, except it's the days like this, they don't want to be outside. But if it's raining or windy or cold or something, we have an indoor culture. So there's actually, you know, this is really a 30-year project if we're honest about it. But, you know, a journey begins with the first step.
Could I just add very quickly to that, Albie?
Yeah.
Following the 88 Olympics, I saw statistics and the growth in sports activities following the Olympics, you know, and the impetus from that were all indoor sports.
Yeah.
They weren't the outdoor sports. So hockey is inside an arena, and figure skating, etc., etc.
Speed skating.
But there was not the same number of growth in the outdoor sports, and which I find is just said.
Yeah, yeah, controlled environment, like the same every. Yeah, so it's something. Can it be changed? Well, it's worth noting there's a city called Oulu, which is 100 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle in Finland, and 25% of kids, and it's dark all. It has a month or so where it's basically dark all day. Certainly for about 3 months a year, they go to school in the dark and come home in the dark, and 25% of kids ride their bike to school. So it's not, and 25% of it ride in summer, also ride in winter then. So it's a smaller percentage of adults riding bikes, but it's still, but they also have incredible biking infrastructure. But it's not impossible, but it does require a seismic change in how we look at things. We can't, we can't do all that overnight, but we can start to make some progress, I think. So I just, these are two possible strategies that I can see that our community can put together, that no one organization here can do by itself, but which with all the organizations together. And there were some other organizations that were coming tonight and didn't show up in the end, but that's okay. It's a difficult time of year, and we'll do something again in the fall, but if we can at least get moving on things. Because the sport policy, the next iteration is coming out in the fall. That's the last chance. I think, am I correct, Catherine? The last chance to have major input is the next iteration of sport policy. She's probably on mute right now.
Not muted. She's there. Maybe she walked away from the computer.
Maybe. We can ask her later. I think, just go ahead, Kurt.
Well, another tide that I'm seeing change, especially at the university, is there's a more awareness of the risk in sport. On the flip side, that has grown significantly related to concussion or injury.
Yeah.
There's a big shift that probably also didn't exist 10, 15 years ago.
There's increasing dialogue. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of solid research around outdoor activities. To the extent that I see research around outdoor activity, it's about 10 times safer than sport in terms of what I would call the serious injuries. They're not necessarily life-threatening injuries, but if you blow your knee out, that's a serious injury, because you will get osteoarthritis in it. By the time you're middle-aged, you're going to have a lot of problems doing any kind of physical activity. So then you get sedentary, and then it's kind of over into physical literacy. We have stout warriors that can get their hips replaced and keep going, and that's because you have high physical literacy, but for most not. So yeah, I think you're right. There's the certainly potential to change the dynamic. The biggest concern right now is people are afraid to do sport and do nothing. Instead, we want to say, no, do some sport, but let's try and make it as safe as possible, but also look at outdoor activities actually being a safer alternative. It's not safe if you're going to go and climb Mount Everest. Let's get real, that's not safe. But just general outdoor activities. Cross-country skiing is a very safe sport.
The messaging narrative you said, I think it's important, because usually the only time you see an article in the paper is either, it's the top 25 hikes, really cool places you can go, or it's, someone who got rescued off of Mount Yamnesca the other night, or, there's a, bear closure at Hart Creek, or what have you. And that's that risk messaging. And then if you go to sort of the online media and you see, the comments, what were they doing out there? And it's a lot of negative, how much is it costing us for search and rescue to go in and rescue someone off Mount Yamnesca because they tripped and fell down. Right? It's a lot of that narrative and messaging around. There's an element of risk, but the most dangerous part of an outdoor activity is usually the drive to the place where you're going to go and do that activity.
So, and you're absolutely right. We can change that messaging. Some of you may know I've talked a lot on the TV and around backcountry skiing and avalanche terrain. And when I first started doing that in 1997, the reporters came in and they really only wanted to hear me say, what were these idiots doing out there? It's so dangerous, it's stupid. And I said, well, no, it's not that dangerous. If you take proper precautions and you get training, then the benefits easily exceed the risks. And I got a lot of pushback in that first year, but within about 5 to 7 years, they stopped asking me those stupid questions anymore. And they wanted to know how they could be safe in the backcountry. And they themselves would be saying, we know it's a good activity and people should be doing it. So how
Albie?
safe? Yes.
Just a little comment that comes in there. I think the outdoor activities have the best possibilities for teaching people physical literacy at any age. And that's the thing we often forget, is that physical literacy isn't just acquired as a youth. As we change or as we age, we have to become physically literate again almost every 5 years, because our bodies are changing, our abilities are changing, and whether it's through operations or corrective surgery or strokes or whatever, or you just didn't participate as a youth, all of a sudden you do need to learn those physical literacy skills, whether it's air, land, water, or ice, it doesn't really matter. And the outdoors has the best opportunity to do it in a safe manner. And I think that's one of the things we don't give the outdoors enough credit for.
That's really interesting comment, Catherine. Thanks for that. I must say I hadn't thought about that. I'm going to think about that for a while. I think intuitively I know you're right, but I'm certainly have to think about it. That's great. Thank you. So yeah, so I think the risk question is huge, but we can overcome it. I think we just have to go out there and tell them how it is. You know, if we don't have great research to back us up, we know that it's true. It's fairly obviously true, so we just need to keep pushing it out there, and I think we can be successful. So the first strategy that that's interesting, something showed up there. So would be just a simple consortium to basically create, we used to have an organization called the Calgary Area Outdoor Council. I think most people around this table remember that organization, and briefly its history, it was a volunteer organization. When the last Sport Calgary policy was enacted, they said we want outdoor activity to be part of it. They started funding CAOC, but it didn't really have anything to offer in the end. It wasn't able to find a vision that worked with the city, and so they eventually got defunded, and because it was no longer a volunteer organization, it disappeared. So really what I'm suggesting is I think whatever happens, we need to create some kind of central organization, some sort of consortium of some kind. I don't necessarily know what that looks like, but we'll call it CAOC 2, if you like, but it needs to have a much better focus on what it is it's supposed to be doing, so that it doesn't just disappear again, but actually makes a contribution. In that very simple consortium, one thing that it might do is it might act as a central place where we get together all these different activities that are offering different things. We pool our resources and we advertise out to the community. We can provide this, we can provide the other, and so on. So what I might call the old sport model. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Catherine, or if I'm overstepping my bounds here, but you go to the city, you get involved in soccer, and soccer is an island unto itself, and it's not really interested in having you go play baseball, because you might end up not playing soccer anymore. So rather than having islands, we could work together in this way, and I think that's one possible way, but I think it's not the most efficient way. And I would suggest that if we were to learn from what sport is doing, we would actually form a consortium so that we can create much more of a multi-outdoor literacy program overall. And that might look something like this, that there would be an organizing body that would promote this idea of some sort of multi-outdoor program. It might look different in different places, but it would have all the elements that we talk about here in terms of the skills of cross-country skiing, walking, paddling, navigation, boat camping, all those sorts of things that we want to see. From that, just like sport, some people will be motivated to become really involved in just one of these activities. They're going to become a cross-country skiing nut, or they're going to become a paddling nut, or they join Scouts and that becomes their life. That's great, but if we have a multi-sport in the middle, then I think that also gives us the opportunity to form a relationship, a multi-outdoor activity. We can also then work much more collaboratively with a multi-sport model. And I see a distinct merging possibility there. The kids might be involved in a whole physical literacy program that would have elements of traditional sports and elements of outdoor activity all in together. And I think that sort of thing would get us a lot more community support too.
Yeah, when you look at the Sport Canada model that they've developed, that sport model that you showed there with physical literacy and the excellence in competitive and recreational sports, and the physical literacy, there's a lot of research and stuff that I've done through my coaching certifications and courses and teaching. And Steve Norris at the University was a real proponent of it as multi-sports for kids. provides a better base for physical literacy. So there's lots of research or lots of evidence that shows that kids that do multiple sports become better even if later on when they pick one sport.
When they specialize,
When you look at all the top Olympians, most of them have done pretty high level in at least one or two other sports in the sport that they're in. So there's that side. And then I know from my own understanding, like if you look at European model, they work more on less of an individual sport and more of a multi-sport discipline. And I've coached a lot of kids in cross-country skiing, and some of them have done both competitive cross-country skiing and downhill skiing. And it was interesting when I was working with a couple of girls, and they were skiing with the Lake Louise Ski Club downhill, and their mom was trying to manage the two sports that they were in. I had some discussion with their downhill coach, and he was a Russian, grew up in Russia, and he goes, I don't understand over here in Canada, because he goes, when I grew up with skiing in Russia, we just skied, and on Tuesday we cross-country skied, on Thursday we downhill skied, and this weekend we did a race doing cross-country, and 2 weekends later we run gates and have our downhill race, and at the end of the year we'd have a fun race and combine them. So there's that aspect, but also I think some of the things the Norwegian and German sport models, they're more based on a sport club, kind of along this idea where you join that club and they're related sports, but you're not in a soccer club per se, you're in a sport club, and you do soccer in this season and you do running in this season, and they integrate them all. So I think the idea that you presented there, the multi-outdoor model, fits both what Sport Canada is doing, but some of the stuff that I know from the European sport models. So I know I'm talking more of the sports side of it, but I think that can, if you're developing physical literacy, trying to get people involved in lots of different activities will be better for them in the long run, and create a more positive environment to keep them more involved too.
Yeah, and I think, if we go this route, we have the opportunity to learn two things that we don't necessarily know right now, which would be that, maybe younger kids, they're really looking for more exciting and dynamic types of outdoor activity, and as they get older, maybe they're looking for more contemplative types of activity. For instance, we might find, so having that ability to move around would be interesting, I think.
What I see kind of missing is you're still using the sport model. Right? What I don't see there is the daily physical activity of walking to the store, of learning to bike. It's still a sport model. That's what I don't see.
Not
I was
necessarily.
going to ask where your 87-year-old mother-in-law fits on that.
So, I've pitched this to younger, but in that regard, I see within a model like this is urban biking. So you have kids actually biking also. That if you're running, Sogo, by the way, is like an orienteering type activity, not necessarily competitive. It's like I've only just become introduced to it. It's happening in Calgary. It's growing quite fast, and basically kids have an orienteering problem to solve, but they work together as a group to solve it. It involves lots of running. Okay, I think we can do the same thing around biking. So yeah, absolutely. I'm not. I think we have to develop the program. I think there's things which we're not offering right now that need to be offered. So, for instance, outdoor literacy for me means knowing how to maintain a bike, knowing which bike to use for different things, how to maintain a bike, how to ride a bike in the city, how to lock up a bike, how to keep your bike secure, change a tire, all those things.
And there's also the idea that from 0 to 7, you don't need a sport, you just need to play outdoors. So that access to just outdoor free play that's not structured, we're still talking about very structured sport here as opposed to that outdoor, the skills you learn through free play.
Well, I don't think we have to. And I wasn't going to talk about this because I didn't want to get down too much, but it's great you brought this. It's great to have you here because for me, one thing that the idea of play is a really interesting concept. And we think of kids playing. One of the biggest problems for adults is they forget how to play. And play is involved with creativity. and joy in a really fundamental kind of way. So whatever program we offer is to think about how can we make this a joyful, playful program. If we look at the top athletes, they're actually incredibly creative. They do play, right? I mean, if you look at the Wayne Gretzky's around, well, not anymore, but whoever the top guy is now. I mean, I'm not a hockey fan, but, you know, they do things just like, that's unbelievably creative, but you see how much fun they're having. You know, I tend to see some of the top skiers, and I see how playful they are with their skis. I mean, it's unbelievable what they do. So I hear you, absolutely. So, I mean, and in terms of age, you're right. The younger age groups, actually kicking a ball for a 5-year-old is actually not, it's a bit of a frustrating experience to do very much of unless it's really playful. So, yeah, so definitely younger age groups, less structured, but I think we do see more structure as we go on, and that's useful in the right framework, and that if you're going to go camping, there has to be some structure in that. Otherwise, it doesn't work out very well.
I think that part of the model is that even if you look at, say, the sport approach or the idea of, you get involved with something that's structured to give you those skills and knowledge, but then fundamentally, because you know more about that particular activity, you're more likely to just be, whether you continue to be a, downhill competitive skier because you were in ski racing as a kid, you still know how to ski. So you may say, well, I'm going to be much more comfortable going out and skiing recreationally and having fun, even if they don't necessarily pursue it as, a career or a sport. So I'm just wondering, how does that map to some of the other activities of, like paddling or camping? There is sort of a fundamental, set of skills that someone needs to learn to be able to do these types of things effectively and have fun. Now, I don't know if you're going to have competitive camping, but
God, I hope not.
Yeah. I mean, you still want to. There needs, I think, needs to be some kind of framework as to how do you share the skills and how do you get that knowledge out to the larger community.
One thing I see that you're doing here is trying to build on the strength of the sport model, which in a lot of ways makes sense. But I agree that what we created is a concept of outdoor sport. And it creates some of the same trappings that you've identified as sport in that it addresses knowledge and skills, but doesn't address motivation. And it doesn't leverage a lot of the strengths that come with outdoor activities. So for example, I think, talking about motivation, promoting people to do it, there's a lot of sports people wouldn't do if there wasn't some sort of external push to have them try it. But outdoor activities, general basic outdoor literacy, I think happens spontaneously as long as people are given the opportunities. And so one angle, and it doesn't necessarily have to exist in isolation, but there are plenty of examples where if you give people the opportunity, they take advantage of it. You talk about this town in Norway where people are cycling because it's got great cycling infrastructure. Do they need to promote cycling, or do they need to remove the barriers to cycling? And if you remove the barriers, does it happen automatically? And so perhaps what we want is some sort of, instead of constructing up a program, organic growth of what people want to take advantage of and removing the barriers and let them spontaneously explore that. And that keeps it, one of the advantages that you talked about are the fact that it's less organized. It doesn't require larger groups. You may want to do it alone, or you might want to do it in a small group. It's often more spontaneous. It's more playful. These are all things that don't lend themselves well to an outdoor sport model like this. Like I said, not to say that it can't exist in complementary fashions, but I would like to see an approach that really takes advantage of the real strengths of outdoor literacy.
Perhaps I've oversold the idea of stealing from sport here, because it wasn't my thought that this multi-outdoor thing would be competitive or anything like that, but rather would be built on ethics that are the ethics of non-competitive outdoor activity, which are the ones that you're talking about: playfulness, spontaneity, cooperativeness, creating a space. I agree that, I mean, in terms of, and in fact, within our community, that's one of the problems for our community, is you can do it with yourself or with a friend. You don't need an organization, so we don't have an organization, which is great if you go to a school that provides that, or if your parents do that. So my kids are outdoor literate because they're my kids. But if your parents don't have those skills, and if your school doesn't provide that, those kids never have that. So to create a program that we can empower those kids with some basics, hopefully they won't become dependent on that organization, but rather become empowered to leave that organization and do what works for them as they get older.
I think the underlying assumption that I'm a little unsettled with is the fact that if we promote it, it will happen. And I think it will happen more effectively, spontaneously, if we remove the barriers. And what I don't see happening in these proposals is barrier removal to allow people to pursue something they might want to do without having to have it promoted. You know, if you build it, they will come. You know, when we build cycle tracks, people start riding on them. You don't really have to promote them very much. You remove the barriers to people being uncomfortable riding on the roads. When we build parks, people start using them. When we build cross-country ski trails, there's not a lot of advertising, but if you go out, it's a lot of traffic on the weekends.
But can that be in certain situations a bit of a cart and a horse problem? Because without organizing it, how do the groups that are trying to build it get any support for it? Meanwhile, the other groups, like the sporting model, get a significant amount of push for these new facilities.
I agree, and that's why I think it's not isolated. I think there is some promotion is a benefit. Some organization is helpful, but I think just some simple advocacy and some facts behind it. People are interested in doing this, and these are the barriers. We'd like to spend so much money or develop some sort of program that clears these barriers. And you know, if it's liability concerns with school groups going out, if it's lack of infrastructure, lack of training or awareness could be one of the barriers. So offering, you know, a competency course to let people get started is one way to remove the barrier. But if you assume that they're not going to do it unless you promote it, I think you'll come at it in a different way than if you assume that they want to do it and we've just got a system that's holding them back.
Was the motivation a big part of why people don't do sport, outdoor activity?
Sorry?
Wasn't motivation a big reason why people don't do outdoor activity? Because they don't have the motivation to do it?
They don't have the motivation. They don't, yeah, that's why people don't do it. They don't, it's an interesting, we all do the activities we do and we feel empowered to do them, but we all know people for whom it's too much, right? Whatever it is we're doing in this room, other people think they can't believe that you do that stuff, and they don't really understand even why you enjoy it. And so it's because they don't have those experiences. They don't have positive attitudes about this activity. They don't believe this activity will work for them. They don't have the skills to make it work for them. In fact, it may not even be fun for them. You go cross-country skiing for the first time, it may not actually be that much fun if you spend your time on your ass and you don't have someone, typically someone, it's not always the case. I mean, I was pretty outdoor literate, so I just picked up skis and thrashed it until the bruises went away. But for most people, I was just laughing. He's seen my model a few times. But for most people, they actually need to have their hand held up.
I challenge that lack of motivation. You know, the fact that you get so many people who own skis that have never been skied on or backpacks that have never been out on the trail tells me that they want to go do it. They're going and buying the gear because that's the easy step that they can do. There's something else that's stopping them from using it. Right? Yeah, motivation is a very difficult thing. You can't tell what's motivating or demotivating people, you know, just by looking. But
Albie, can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Catherine. Can you hear the rest of the group here, by the way?
I can actually, and you know, motivation's an interesting thing because there's outside motivation and inside motivation, and if you don't have competencies and ability and self-assurance, you're not going to be internally motivated at first. We know that kids stop participating, the ones that stop participating first are either burned out or they aren't motivated through their example. So if parents are always just sitting there watching them play or sitting doing nothing, that's what a child learns. They learn they're supposed to sit and do nothing as they age. So where's the motivation coming from? Not everybody has internal motivation without competency to start with. Or, you know, there's the odd ones who are willing to pick up the skis and go try anything, and sometimes they like it and sometimes they don't, and they'll try something else or whatever. But it's getting the motivation from the outside to the inside that keeps people involved, whether they're active in sport or whether they're active just for themselves and their pleasure that they get out of being active.
Just a comment on the importance of play leading to
literacy. Children learn by play. And that's where we have to start finding people involved in outdoor literacy. We can do other things with adults, but it's children where we want to build. And if we put them on a racing bike, they're going to get bored silly. Put them on a tractor, put them on a BMX bike and on and play, and they'll crash around parks, and they like risk. Contrary to what you were saying earlier, I think people like risk, but as long as it's a control.
Well, they like thrill. They don't actually like to get hurt.
Well,
I think actually the science is quite clear on this. We like the excitement. We don't want to die, and we don't want to get hurt.
But they like to show off the road rash too. But the whole business of creating, giving kids motivation to get out comes from role modeling. It comes from the making things available for them. How are we doing anything to really get that message out that outdoor literacy is fun? It's nothing. It's got health benefits. It's got lots of other benefits that we can talk about. But to kids and to most people, we just have to say it's fun, and it has to be fun. And cross country skiing can be fun if you do it in the right way and you start them off in the right way. And I had an outdoor teacher come to I hired in my school, and he brought a class set of cross country skis, and those kids had a whole winter of fun cross country skiing, and on the winter games and so forth. But they played at recess with cross country skiing.
The thing's fun. You look at how many kids go, Mom, Dad, can I? And whatever they want to do is something that we're trying to promote. And how often do those parents say no? And why are they saying no? So the fact that kids go, can I, means they're motivated. They have the drive, and there's something that's stopping them. And that external is something else.
It's a good point there, because I know, as a scout involved with scouts, I've had a couple of parents, very, bluntly come and ask me, they're thinking of registering their kids in scouts, but it's like, okay, well, I'm choosing between, scouts, karate, piano lessons, or, math tutor. So what is scouts? It's basically, I'm in, competition with these other activities. Why should I give up my son or daughter's, Monday evening to do this? What are they going to get out of it? What are they? So, I mean, there's sort of that expectation, right? So, I mean, part of it is, telling the story around, well, there is, there's social elements, there's problem solving, there's about learning by doing, there's, a whole bunch of different elements. But I think in some cases, some parents are like, oh yeah, that just sounds like fluff. I'd rather have my kid do piano lessons rather than go to scouts, right?
Well, that goes back to the first screen where it was product. What's your product at the end of the day? If you look at Captain Nicola Goddard, they did a big thing with the Environmental Mayors Project, and they created green commuting hubs. And every kid by postal code was given a meetup spot to walk, bike, skateboard, scooter, whatever activity they wanted to do. But they couldn't arrive by car, and it was a challenge. And there were prizes that were given by Nike. So it was student run. The oldest class there, I think, were 12-year-olds. They were grade 6. They were in charge, but not in a risk-assuming way. So all they had to do was take attendance, take it to the points. Everybody had a meetup spot. Everybody had a contact. So if your kid didn't show up, hey, are you not coming today? Whatever. Everyone arrived to school together. And that's all it is taking out that risk aversion, because a lot of people, well, my kid can't bike to school because it's so dangerous and there's all this traffic. Well, if the entire school, by then, there's no traffic, because that's the only drive for the traffic in the first place.
I live right beside an elementary school, and I'm absolutely astonished. The parents, the mothers, or the nanny, whomever this woman is worried that their kid be safe and to hell with anybody else's kid. And it really, you suddenly realize that the most dangerous part is not speeding traffic going through a school zone, but it's careless, I'm assuming fellow mothers who are not backing up, parking illegally on a crosswalk, parking illegally on a road junction, whatever it is, and that's the most probably the most dangerous part of the entire trip.
But your motivation there, the kids were motivated because they were having fun, and there was a bit of a challenge to it. The parents were against it at the beginning because they were worried about the risks. The school managed the risks without actually assuming the liability. And I think you've got the two forces working against each other at all times. If I ride my bike to work, I'm questioned, oh, well, isn't that dangerous? You're riding on busy roads. Like, no, I was much safer than you were in your car, but that goes back to that risk management and how you sell that message. So you need the promotions to let people know it's okay to let your kids go outside. They are not going to get taken by the boogeyman who is hiding in the bushes. They can go out and play.
I want to just push back a little bit because I'm very interested in what everyone's saying here, and I don't actually disagree. But you talk about people who buy a backpack and don't go backpacking. Promotion will get you to buy the backpack. What actually gets them to go backpacking? What are the barriers that prevent them from going backpacking? And there are probably quite a few. It's having someone to go with. It's knowing where to go. But it's also, as Catherine was saying, the internal motivations that are related to, there's a lot of literature showing that what we call self-efficacy, belief in our own ability to do, is critical for physical activity. If you have strong self-efficacy, that's what actually builds the resilience to get you over that. But how do you build that self-efficacy? You can watch kids do it in play. You put them in some sort of challenge situation, and initially they're very hesitant because they don't know they can do it. But as they build the self-efficacy and learn the boundaries of their ability, then after a while they feel very confident in doing it. So no matter what age group we're talking about, overcoming those barriers involves enabling them to actually experiment with, play with the particular challenge in question. But if we don't provide that for them, and that's the bottom reality, there's nothing stopping anyone from doing any of these activities if they had the internal motivation to do it, but they don't have the internal motivation because they haven't had the hand up. So I hear what you're saying. When we look at biking infrastructures, classic, if we actually had a biking infrastructure like they have in Copenhagen, which I've experienced, everyone would ride bikes. It makes so much more sense than driving a car. But you're not going to get there. That's not going to happen so easily, and we can't wait for that to happen. We can do much better than that. And the same for cross-country skiing. There won't be much cross-country skiing unless we build cross-country ski tracks in Calgary, where people can access them in half a day or whatever from home. And and then having built it, what about the skis? How do we, I think it's a great example. The school teacher buys a bunch of skis and the kids play around on them and they become skiers by default, whether they get lessons or not. There's a lot of ways how we might do this, but unless we actually make the effort to present that opportunity to we'll say kids, because I'm actually primarily thinking about kids here, but there's no reason it can't be adults too. But unless we creatively think, and we've heard some creative ideas, quite a few creative ideas already. I don't want to get, I think by presenting like this, I've given the wrong idea here that I want to create sport for outdoor, which is not what I'm talking about. It's maintaining that ethic of outdoor, which is that playful, collaborative, spontaneous, non-competitive, have fun type of thing. Although sometimes, if you want kids to go camping, you have to teach them how to use a stove. And trial and error is not a good way of doing it.
So good, go ahead. Sorry. No, I agree totally with what Albie's saying, and I think if you think of barriers, and I agree with you on that, but I think if we think of a key barrier in a lot of activities is getting that basic skill set. And I use cross-country skiing. It's easy to go out and just walk around the park on your cross-country skis, but you're not really cross-country skiing, you're walking on your skis. And if you can develop just a basic skill set in that, and you can have a lot more enjoyment on it, and you'll be a lot more motivated to do it. And just learning how to go down hills. And can control yourself going down the hill. You'll create a safe environment. You'll see it as a less risky thing to do, and you'll be a lot more motivated to go and do it. So I think having an organization where you have the ability to learn basic skill sets, and even walking, people like to walk with hiking poles. Well, I've seen 90% of people don't really use them the way they're supposed to be used. They're just tapping them on the ground. They're not really doing anything other than having something in their hand. So just, I think, if we think of barriers as the basic skill sets to have. So playing on your skis, you can learn a certain amount, but having an environment, and this is what we do with coaching, and I think this gal over here said it as well, but I think that's really important. We teach that in the fundamental stage, in the learn to train stage. You want to use a lot of unstructured play, but giving some basic skills so they can get up the hill and get down the hill and feel safe about it, and then let them go and they'll learn the agility, they'll learn the balance and coordination, and they'll learn how to move properly, but not only providing basic skill, but setting that environment up so that they can have the best opportunity to learn what they're playing is really important to use.
Yeah, I want to take issue with the conclusion that you made with the Norwegian cross-country skiers and cyclists because they have the infrastructure. I've done a lot of cycling in Britain, which is crazy now, of cycling and the whole place gone crazy. They have terrible infrastructure. It's horrible. The streets are narrow. I was riding in London 2 months ago, and the bicycle lane is this wide. But there's loads of bikes going down it, and there's loads of taxis working their way around, and buses and everything else. And everybody's working together. It works fine. But what they do have, and is the motivation. They've got the Froomes, and they've got the Cavendish, and they've got these people as well. Plus, they have a history, of course, of cycling. But they're undergoing a real boom, and it's because of role models as well as other things. But it's no one thing solution. So infrastructure is not the solution. Controlling the message is not the solution. It's all of these things working together and getting a combined plan that will get us there. And I still think kids need to play, and the opportunity is there for them to go into skills. But I think if we push skills too hard, we push them away.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you need to have a basic skill. So there's an organization called Paddleheads that gets together and they teach them basic biking skills, but most of it is just playing on bikes. But they still have the basic. They learn road safety. They learn how to balance and maneuver bicycles. So they learn the basic skill set. They do play a lot. Cross country club with young kids. We do, in an hour and a half lesson, they'll probably do 10 minutes of what we would call skill activity, and the rest of it is playing games and things like that. So it's having both of those and understanding how to apply it.
That's one thing since there's generally in sport, and that I mentioned high five, but just generally within sport, there's a lot of pushback against the sport model that was there a while ago, which was 50 or 75% skills and drills and 25% free play. Now, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the push is towards essentially a lot more free play with just some specific skills. And I think for outdoor activity, because we're less concerned about competition, we can compress that skill development even more. You're right, to enjoy cross-country skiing, it really helps if you've got the basic movements down to some degree. But for a lot of other activities, just being out in nature, just playing in nature, you actually don't need any instruction at all. People can do that quite well, open the space for them.
Albie, sorry. No, I've got another take that's complementary to, I'm not saying this is in opposition in any way. I'm a retired petroleum geologist and exploration manager, and I've always been interested in management of people, and now I'm a full-time volunteer. I'm interested in managing volunteers for some major events, ski related. But we're now at the point where the newspapers are filled with articles about the baby boom generation is retiring and it's the next generation, and how do we prepare them to take over the managerial positions, quote unquote. Now, the Geological Society has lunch lectures twice a month. Whatever the arithmetic is now, 25 years ago, there was an outstanding presentation by a representative of one of the oil companies that they were looking at replacing the old guard with the then upcoming baby boom generation and what made a good exploration geologist. And what they discovered in their research was being taken out with their parents for simple hiking, rambles in nature. Look at the pretty flowers. Oh, just look, there's another different coloured butterfly from what we just saw, 10 feet back. And it's that sort of thing that encouraged the creative thinking, the inquisitive thinking about, how things work. And this is what this oil company found was the critical factor in terms of who made a good exploration geologist as opposed to a development geologist, was this ability to think that had come from, going out with their parents. And that certainly is my background. My parents met through a hiking club in Glasgow, Scotland. And so I was taken out as a boy, to nearby country lanes and look at the wildflowers, the weeds, and look at the butterflies, etc. So I did the experiment in my company, very unofficial, very casual, coffee cup in hand, dropped into my staff's, not in any systematic fashion, so nobody could put two and two together, but just asked them about, tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do in your spare time? What do you do? What was your background? And lo and behold, every one of the quote-unquote better, more inquiring, inquisitive exploration geologists had a similar experience. They had gone out on rambles in nature with their parents. And I think that's an aspect that we really have to also be aware of, apart from the physical literacy, is what are we doing mentally for people, and are we encouraging this? And I'm astonished, and my wife complains at the number of newspaper clippings that I'm accumulating, because there's so many articles at the moment in the business pages of the National Post and the Globe and Mail and the Calgary Herald about, this turnover of the next generation and the need for creative thinking and inquisitive minds, etc., etc. So I think everything I applaud has been said, but there's this extra dimension, which is, are these people mentally getting skills that will make them a better, more inquisitive, therefore a better worker, a better manager 20 years, 30 years later? So I offer that to the mix.
So that's actually right within the idea of, it's called physical literacy.
Yes.
I started out with the idea that what Whitehead is saying is actually to develop your mind, you need to be physical. So to give a very specific classic case of a high-rise that was built, and after they built the high-rise, the engineer in charge of the ducting had made a miscalculation. All the ducting was too small. He would never have made that mistake had he been an outdoor active child, because he would have had a tactile sense of how big something needed to be to do a job. That's what we learn by moving. So I mean, it speaks to what you're saying. So, and this idea of, I'm sorry if I overplayed the sports thing. The bit of sport that I really want to play is how it's successful because of how it's organized. Not that the actual activities we want to organize look like how sporting activities are organized. Let's recognize also that sporting activities are changing too, that they're not maybe what we remember as sport, and maybe in many cases put us off from sport. So I absolutely agree with the plate on this. I think, and I think the fact that we have agreement around that, I mean, I really heard agreement around the table here that outdoor activity is not about skill and drill. It's not the physical, the fact that it's called physical literacy shouldn't overwhelm us with the idea that we have to do the skill and thing. That's just one of three different elements. And in the outside, to be honest, to have a great time outdoors for your whole life, you don't need to be very skillful. because it's not competitive. Lack of supreme skill will not stop you from hiking, cross-country skiing, biking, or whatever. You just need to be adequate, that's all, and you can have a great time.
I think that, but if you, Alistair, you've taken your last statements or series of statements and replaced the word skill with opportunity, I think you'd have a similar approach, but it would open up some doors, you know, like, and again, I don't necessarily have the right solution here, I'm just kind of throwing stones at the model you put up there, but I look at that multi-outdoor model, what I don't see is jumping in puddles, playing tag, or walking to the grocery store. And those are things that I think are very foundational in outdoor literacy. And so I appreciate a lot of what's being built there, just it feels like we're missing what is the greatest strength of outdoor literacy.
In my mind, they were in that multi-outdoor activity. In my mind, so where I think this needs to go is for us to sit down together and think through this in an ordered way and say what's important about outdoor activity that needs to be retained. So the idea of play, you know, and jumping in puddles and hopscotch, that's something that needs to be. Integrating it into your daily life is absolutely critical. So so one tool that is out there, I can't remember, it's called Take 5 or something, or Take 60 or something, but it's an opportunity for kids very simply to be able to put in each day how much they moved, what they ate, what they drank, and they get a score associated with that. Those folks are willing to allow us to adapt that model for an outdoor environment. So that would encourage kids to say, well, I didn't just go to my outdoor class today, or whatever we want to call it, but it's what do you do the rest of the time? The outdoor class was fun, but did you walk to school? Did you walk to the store? Did you just go home and sit on your computer? Or did you go and play in your garden? My mom wouldn't let me play in the garden. Let's talk to your mom. Let's work with your mom on this. Let's help you, because it's a whole project here, right? If you, and someone said this already, that the parents aren't doing it, the kids don't do it, but the parents also have to allow it. And so there's a whole conversation there to be had.
So one of my questions is, what's the opportunity around this sport policy that's happening? It sounded like this is moving along. So what's the opportunity that we don't want to miss?
So as I see it, and Catherine could probably add some depth to here. First of all, one thing is there's potentially some money there. They once funded a KOP position. I don't see why they wouldn't fund someone to be the central administrator to actually see a few things get done. Okay, I certainly see it as being a volunteer. It's up to us to do it. For us. But what I see as the real opportunity is that if we're able to create a sport policy and to work with Sport Calgary and work with the city so that we become integrated into the general promotion of activities, so that we're at the table, so we build a program that we think will work, and it incorporates all the things that the people around this table have said are important, and a way of delivering that to kids in the city, or it could be adults too. I mean, it can be all ages, but I'm certainly thinking within the kid framework, because that's where most of this goes on. That's where we can affect a lot of change. I also invited incidentally Sport and Social Calgary, and I wasn't able to connect with the person. It never happened, but that's an adult group that could be part of a consortium like this and promote it to adults. But that would give us access to propaganda. It would give us access to organization. It would give us legitimacy. It would also give us the opportunity to work with Parks and Rec to get access to facilities. So maybe we could put up slack lines in a city park, which we're not allowed to do right now, or whatever it is that we want to do. So I think by integrating to that overall structure, I see the opportunity to get a lot of resources to help us move this thing out. And actually, because we also have to recruit and people to participate in the program. So how do we connect with the various communities, with the parents, with the anything and everything? I think there's a lot of infrastructure there that already exists for sport that we can latch on to.
So I guess maybe it's a question for Catherine. You can talk about, but how do you actually get on the table? Like, that's the question.
I think one of the opportunities that this has is that with this revision of the Calgary sport policy, it's becoming more holistic, and they see it more as a continuum, right from birth all the way up to whenever you choose not to participate anymore. And part of that is also looking at all the different aspects of activity and opportunities. The outdoors has been, because it didn't work the first time for whatever reason, it didn't fit the mold, or we didn't fit its mold, it needs to be back at the table. You're going to hear a whiny kid in a minute. I got to mute for a second, just a second.
Let him outside.
The reason that Catherine's not here tonight, she's babysitting 3 small children. I did say we had a bike lock, and it was quite far away from here. We wouldn't be able to hear anything, but she declined the opportunity.
I think the other thing, because I attended that same meeting of the sport policy, is understanding facilities that are just needed for outdoor. Because it's easy to say, well, you can do activities anywhere outdoors, but I think you need parks, you need walking paths. We know, there's a strong Calgary Mountain Bike Alliance that's pushed to mountain bike trails in Millsdale Park and Fish Creek and things like that. But I know from my perspective, and Alistair knows this too, is we're sadly lacking in cross-country facilities. It's 2 clubs that basically look after the little bit of cross-country skiing we have in Calgary other than COP. And there's very little.
And it's partly because we're not at the table.
Exactly, yeah.
And if we're more at the table, then it's going to be easier for us to create the case. And I think there was a lot of discussion when WinSport was potentially going to do something. And so for those that don't know the debate at the table, and I don't know it as well as you guys know it, I'm sure, but the Tri-Sports Council that preceded Sport Calgary said, well, but there's whatever there is, there's 100,000 hockey players and there's only 998 skiers because they only counted competitive skiers as being skiers. So there's no need for cross-country ski facilities. That debate would be different today anyway, but I think if we're at the table, we can make it really different. And there is this, this clear indication, as Catherine said, on the part of sport to really change the way that sports are offered. Can we be there to provide actually what they need to make that really happen? And if we can, then there's no reason why we can't get some of the sorts of resources which are quite significant that go to other physical activity as is appropriate for us, which might mean that we actually get some money to build and maintain cross-country paths. Or part of this debate, in my mind, is Calgary actually needs a physical literacy policy for Calgary, because physical literacy is more than sport, it's more than recreation, it's more than parks. It also includes transportation decisions and urban design decisions. So, but if, the Bike Calgary's got a strong presence and Abbotsford is doing good work, but if we can band together, we can make Bike Calgary stronger, and Bike Calgary can make us stronger. And if your programming is involved with our programming, then it creates, I don't know what you know about the bike paths on Northmount Drive here, but they go past 5 different schools. And as far as I know, the only way that school boards have involved themselves in that is making sure they can still get their buses in and out. Whereas if we were a stronger presence in the city, maybe we would have been able to move that discussion to how can we get these kids biking to school instead of using the buses, and what needs to attach to those bike paths to make it possible for them to get to their house to the bike path. Like totally change the discussion, which then helps us create that other type of facility, which is the urban design facility, if you like.
It highlights an interesting challenge we've got in Bike Calgary, which is we have a certain component of promotion, but largely we're trying to remove barriers. And that's what I see our role as, at least. But we keep having other activities creeping into it. So sure, we're Bike Calgary, but people want to also deal with pedestrian access and integrating other activities and all sorts of things. And we keep having to draw boundaries around it and say, hang on, we're still just focusing on cycling. Well, that's a great problem to have, but I think that highlights the fact that there's a great desire to do a lot of this stuff. Granted, it's not everybody, but a lot of what I'm hearing are opening up opportunities, and that's, I think, really where we need to focus.
And then there's an energy issue.
Yeah.
Which particular type of energy? Hydrocarbon or human? Manpower, yeah.
Volunteering.
Yeah. So building capacity, because that would be an issue, is building leadership capacity. I think we can see a way forward to that. I can definitely see how that can be done. The training that we do at the Outdoor Council would provide a framework, but in terms of specific things, we have experts, for instance, in cross-country skiing who can train parents at least to be able to teach the basics of cross-country skiing. They're not going to be world-class teachers, but they could certainly learn and provide basics of cross-country skiing. Am I right? Up to a level. I don't see any reason why not. Same for biking. Develop a program around bike safety that's specific to Calgary. I know there are bike safety programs all across Canada, but we need one specific to Calgary that deals with our particular culture and our particular infrastructure problems. Those sorts of things, I think, can be delivered.
Well, that's one possibility. We've talked a lot about making sure that kids get active. And I think one of the biggest barriers with the parents,
Yeah.
the ones that either allow them to do the activity or not. Perhaps the approach we need to take is train the trainers. We need to educate the parents to train the kids, and that should unlock the opportunities for the kids to do more. And so maybe instead of trying to teach the kids, we actually try to teach the parents.
We'll see, like, for example, in our community, I'm sure this is across Calgary, like what they call, the rec soccer league, right? It's the neighborhood soccer. They get hundreds of kids out to play soccer, 2 or 3 times a week. And it's not, the coaches are, they maybe gone and done, an afternoon type, training session on how to be a coach. They're not necessarily teaching the epitome of, soccer skills, but it's kids that are coming together, they play, they have fun, maybe they keep score, maybe they don't, but it's this kind of more, it's still competitive, it's still sport, but they're more just playing. And it's not a huge investment of skill, but there is a framework that needs to sort of go around.
Soccer primarily runs on volunteers. I mean, I was one of those coaches for a while. And when I look back, I had a lot to learn. And had I been helped, had I had the type of training that's provided to outdoor leaders through the OCC program, providing that to people coaching soccer today who might be scout leaders tomorrow, to give them a basic set of skills on how to get a bunch of kids and create a really powerful experience for those kids, whether it be a soccer experience or a camping experience or a puddle jumping experience. I think that instead of those coaches then when soccer's over, they no longer are involved as a parent volunteer, but can be involved with their kids in all these different activities. I think there are generic skills around managing a group of kids together. And that's something that we could actually bring to sport that would enrich sport, but it would also help us tap into all those volunteers, because parents do step up. I did. Actually, my wife stepped me up, but that doesn't matter. I still agreed. I was away one day and I got back and found I was a soccer coach. Well, you're English, you must know how.
I think one of the important things to look at then would be, because kids, I mean, they're easy. They're kind of slim pickings. Like, they're in school, you can do organized sports and organized play, and it's fairly easy. How do we hit my generation? Like, Cyclepalooza is, Bike Calgary does a lot on advocacy, but we don't run events per se. Cyclepalooza is getting people out to play, and they have bike prom, and everyone dresses up in a tux and goes for a bike ride. They go for beehive tours, they go for bakeries, they go for bike ride picnics. Like, how do we encourage that kind of model where the motivation is just desire to go out and play and have fun? Do you want your
Okay, sure.
I'm curious if
So this
there's
is a big square on the outside.
there's like a baby boomer volunteer recruitment strategy or something in place. We're all talking about baby boomers that are, leaving the workplace, and we all know that volunteering is an important aspect of remaining healthy and active and engaged as you stop working. So it sounds like we might be getting, and somebody mentioned, where do we find those volunteers? It sounds like we might be at a juncture where there's an opportunity here.
For the baby boomers to be the volunteers.
Yeah, the baby boomers to be the volunteers, and then, whatever organization is created, maybe part of the strategy is creating something for to be ready to recruit baby boomers and prepare them and things like that.
I think, oh, sorry.
So go ahead, Kurt.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I'm not really sure what the focus is here. It's a little bit scattered, whether it's kids, whether it's adults, and I think there would have to be a focus on some group to maybe, in the beginning, and hopefully it would build from there. But you're just to say, okay, we just want to have outdoor activity, outdoor literacy for everybody.
Yeah,
It's a tough place to start. It's a tough place to start. So I'm not really sure if you have kind of a focus of what the idea was, or...
I think these things tend to fall into place fairly naturally. I think if we sat around and looked around at the principles of what we'd want to see this type of program to look like, and I think we've shared, I've certainly learned lots tonight. I hope everyone else has learned something. And I think as a group we can learn about what it might look like. And then, but it's going to look different for different kids. I mean, you're involved a lot with the children's play movement. I mean, really, it's like put them in the wilderness and get out of the way. It's that simple in a lot of ways. It's not that simple with a bunch of 10-year-olds necessarily. It's certainly not that simple if you're going to take them camping. So, or cross-country skiing. So I think we have to figure out what it is we want to do and build some programs. And, it'll be experimental, right? You're going to maybe have 10 different activities and you're going to find the kids don't like this activity. It doesn't work for them. It's the wrong age. It's not the right activity or something. I think it'll be an exploratory process. And then who can we get in? In reality, if we were to pitch it at teenagers, it might be a tough sell. Whereas we know that kids, that are between about 6 and 10 or 11, that's actually, there's a huge market there, if you want to call it a market. And to a large extent, if kids are not involved when they're young, they're harder to get involved later. Something I didn't talk about, by the way, is for this to be successful, we have to find a way of keeping them in the activity when they're teenagers. That's the big dropout. It's the big dropout for sports, the big dropout for physical activity. You go through that, kids go through a really important stage between puberty and when they leave home, and if they're not active in that period, their chance of being active after that is not great. And so that's true for sports, true for outdoor activity too.
I think we've got to separate out our ultimate vision, which I think we mostly agree on, which is we want children to be exposed to outdoor literacy such that they can become outdoor literate adults. Right? The ultimate goal is a lifetime of activity. The how you want to do it is, I think, where we're starting to get into barriers. Now, are we targeting the 6 to 10-year-olds? Because that's the group we think we would start with. Or is the how going to be, let's engage the people that are controlling their activities or influencing their activities, right? So as a relatively small group, are we going to be able to target a whole bunch of 6 to 10-year-olds, or are we going to be able to target a group of people that can influence a broad group, cascade it down?
Working at the university for a decade now, I guess, something I've learned is our group makes a lot of assumptions on the 90% that are around this table. And I think the most important thing, because I come from construction, oil and gas, and then agriculture, so I came from a whole bunch of stuff, and then I came into the outdoor industry, and I find we make a lot of assumptions, and without a couple almost round tables with the people that have bought the backpack but aren't going outside, we're talking with blindfolds on, to be frank. And that's one of the, it's making assumptions like that risk what we're doing. We understand, I think we've all agreed on a goal of getting more people active outside. However, more people, more active, more often, or whichever, but and then the other stumbling block is in the outdoors, we've got all these different groups. So we want to be an organized non-organization, because without being organized, we can't be at the table. So we've got a few different angles that I think we kind of need to crack before we get into what we're delivering, because we've identified who, we identified what we want to achieve, but how we get there, I think we're missing the population that can tell us that answer. And I honestly, I think that's, we have people with a sport background, and I've done a lot in sport too, and that's there's a lot of people talking about how to get more people active in sport, but all of them are active in sport, and that's our biggest problem at the table. So I think, and that was one of the reasons we pushed the Outdoor Council of Canada, is it doesn't compete with anybody. The whole point of that was and avoiding competition is another one that really, we have to realize we're a small pocket. We're not competing to get someone to buy our cell phone and not someone else's. We're trying to get the people that aren't doing it to do it. So I'm at a different table with all of the leaders of recreation for the city of Calgary. So YMCA, Windsport, like it's all of the top people in each of these areas, and it's been really quite a challenge because we're going through a similar process to this, because we all want our product to be front and center. So how do we work together without competing with each other in a combined goal? So my suggestion is having a few, even people around this table going out and asking people who've bought that backpack, who have that bike collecting dust in their car, and maybe we come up with some questions or some way to just get some input from those individuals, because there are a lot of perceptions about our industry, and it doesn't look intimidating once you're in it, but it sure is intimidating from the outside. And the retail is the easiest entrance into it, but people can buy it, and doing it's where the big gap lies. So, yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe the retailers should be able to represent Mount Cook Co-op and Morrison. I know they do.
They're certainly interested. I spoke to NBC today, and he wasn't able to come. So,
yeah.
But they're interested in being part of this process too.
Because, like Kurt said, they're at the front line, and I know felt the Norsemen quite well. And they're starting to, as well as the Norsemen, and they're starting to do programs, introduction to the backpack.
Yeah, which MEC is doing too. It's a great program. Yeah. If I may offer just an observation, this is something that I've really learned through the Outdoor Council, is we can see a lot of problems here. There's the lack of the parents understanding it's something their kids need, the lack of leaders that we've got, the public image around risk, the facilities problems we got with the messed up urban infrastructure we've got, or the lack of cross-country skis. But actually, it's just like that diagram from Margaret Whitehead. You need competency in all those things to be active. If you push only one, you will fail. You have to push them all equally. And so, and the other thing I've learned is it's a voyage of exploration. That everything we've attempted through the Outdoor Council, we've had to learn along the way, and we've had to, even because we operate across the country, the way we operate is different in different places because of the individual culture and problems of those places. So it'll be the same in Calgary. If we're pushing outdoor activity in West Calgary or East Calgary, it will probably look different. And so it's a matter of being really open. I think that's how you learn about what you don't know, because people say to you whatever they say to you. You know, it's like I mean, the obvious one is that's too dangerous for my kid. So then you realize we've got to educate the parent. And how do you know, and that's not easy to do, but you can do it. And the other thing is through a series of conversations. I mean, this is the other thing I've learned is I've worked with, we've got a lot of partners now, but for most of those partners, it took multiple conversations. And first of all, it was like, why are you talking to me? Moving towards, it seems interesting what you're saying, to we'd like to be involved. And there's usually about 3 or 4 we'd like to be involved until they actually do get involved. And that's how it'll be for us. And we'll learn from that process, and they'll learn from that process. And at the end, if we get something going, what really then starts to work, and is really working for the Outdoor Council now, is word of mouth. People are saying there's this fantastic program, you've got to get your kid into it. And that's what'll make it happen. As long as it is a fantastic program, it's got to be the goods, right?
Can you get like cell phone coverage and network coverage shut off from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock every night?
Yeah.
Are there cities where it's working great, where there's an umbrella organization that's working really well? You know, why reinvent?
In outdoor activity?
In outdoor activity.
As far as I'm aware, absolutely not. So part of what the Outdoor Council is doing. We're a national organization. We pioneered our programs here in Calgary, and we've taken them across Canada. So to a certain extent, what we're doing here, if we can make it work here, the rest of the country will copy us. I've looked at part of the research for the policy renewal in Calgary is what's been done in other communities, and as far as I can see from those other communities, and they are currently the cutting edge communities around physical literacy and sport, and they're not doing this. So unless Catherine knows something I don't know, we will be breaking fresh ground, and the rest of the country is going to be coming to us if we're successful.
So Don and I are going to be talking to our board tomorrow night. What do we tell them? I throw that out to the whole table as well.
Well, I think you have to tell them what you believe. So my hope at the end of this is that we'll agree to keep talking, that we'll agree this is an opportunity worth pursuing and that it's worthwhile for us to work together, and that we'll set a date to work together after the summer is over. And we'll invite in other people who weren't able to be here. That would be my goal for the evening. I think we've learned about some of the things we don't want to see in whatever it is we build, and I think we know about some of the things we want to see. So then I think we have, probably the next meeting will be to sit down and say, okay, what's a process going to look like? So maybe the next meeting needs to be, okay, let's develop a process, because we're not going to solve this problem in a meeting. It is going to be a process. So maybe the first thing is, what's the process going to look like? And then from that, maybe we can start building the elements of what I would call a program.
And our vision. What's the vision?
Well, I think the vision, a vision is maybe even first, right? What is it we want to see? And I think that's what we mostly talked about tonight, right? It was around ideas like play, encouraging people, the participants in this program, not just to be doing it when they're in the program, but doing it in their regular life. So I think those sorts of goals, and then a process for creating a program that honors those goals, and then that will get gradually deeper as, you know, when you start out with, okay, it'll have these bits, but then what does it actually look like, and how do we train leaders to deliver this? And, you know, it's a lot of work, right? So it's a long process. We're not going to crack this nut before Christmas, really. In fact, it's a 30-year process, really.
I was going to ask, is it this Christmas or Christmas 10 or 20 or 30 years from now?
But I'd like to suggest that we don't just jump into a process, but we go through a formal problem definition stage. And maybe we mostly know what the problem is, but I have a feeling it's all a little bit different in our own minds.
Sure. That sounds good. So, yeah.
There's also an element of, you know, how do we combine as sort of maybe a common voice of sort of outdoor activity in general? Because I think from what I've seen, that's a voice that's missing in a lot of discussions, right? So there's this one, you know, Calgary sport policy, but I know, you know, a couple months back I was at a Alberta Environment Development meeting that they're talking what their program was for Wipers over the next year, what construction changes and trail that they were going to be doing. And I mean, you had, you know, Tony and Jillian Different were there, but probably 95% of the people in the room were, you know, the off-roading 4x4 community, right? There was very, very little from, you know, paddling, hiking, backpacking. We know that, you know, at some point, you know, the castle, all the new parks that are going to be set up there, there's going to be a lot of discussions around what is that going to look like. And I think it's important to say, what is that outdoor activity voice that isn't, you know, a whole bunch of smaller organizations that have, you know, different goals and different objectives, but what is that sort of that larger, broader voice to say, okay, these are things that in general that we need to see in order to promote, you know, a more outdoor active community in the future.
So that process is ongoing, and I think we should keep that one separate from the one we're talking about tonight. So just very quickly around some of the things that is happening there. So some of us met with Shannon Phillips a couple of nights ago here in Calgary. So she is looking very much to have the outdoor active community be a stronger voice in the province, and wants to know, she came specifically to find out what our issues were. MEC, the Alpine Club, ACMG are looking at forming something of a group to represent that commercial interest in outdoor activity generally. The Outdoor Council of Canada is, actually we were collecting data at MEC today as part of an economic and social impact of outdoor activity in Alberta. The first stage of that's really going to focus on activity outside the city, but I'm really want to see more of the inside the city, which is where people spend most of their life. And although that's not strictly provincial jurisdiction, it is, because at the end of the day, whether they allocate money to bike lanes or to transit, it will be determined by those sorts of things. Those are things that are ongoing, but I think we need to focus, not be too broad. We can be a representative, we can vote, we can, the minister knows that we're having this meeting, incidentally, because I told her that we're doing this and why we're doing it. So, but I think we need to focus on just in the city, outdoor activity for people in Calgary, in the city, and not worried about if we try and do too many things. I think what we're trying to do is hard enough, for God's sake. Actually, it's a big enough canvas.
Is it Catherine who was talking there? She said something about why we failed in the past.
Oh, sorry, were you talking, Catherine?
No, this is like a while ago before her children started whining.
Are you there, Catherine?
I'm here.
Did you say something about...
Yeah, I'm here.
You started to say something about why we failed in the past.
Well, part of it was the lack of the connection. And I think the thing that's changed since then is the upswing on physical literacy. And physical literacy may be the connector that's going to connect a lot of activity-based organizations in that long chain that may end up in an Olympic podium or sport, but basically where the majority of the population is, which is just an activity for enjoyment and health. And so I think that the opportunity is now that, and it can be jumped on because of that emphasis that seems to be on physical literacy in all kinds of avenues. We didn't have that thread before. And so there seemed to be a disconnect, and it just didn't happen. But I think it can happen now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, frankly, I was never interested in sport policy until I understood what physical literacy was, because I saw that sport was changing, that they were open to a much wider debate, and I understood what that debate might be. Kurt is laughing at me because he knows me.
I was involved in when you the other side a lot more.
Yeah, and the foundation of that that you showed, and the reason that it's really changed about 10, 12 years ago was the whole premise from the idea of pyramid with the Olympian and the Olympic medalist being at the top to a broad perspective where it's active for life at the top. And I think if we can, just an idea that maybe it's that combined vision for this sport model, maybe the outdoor, this is more outdoor activity, outdoor active for life.
Yeah, that big gray spot has now reappeared.
Yeah.
And all the rest of the people disappeared too. So.
Yeah.
But I think sport can be a lot of help.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying.
They could be a role model for us. They can be a role model for children. People can pick up after it. We need to market the advantages and the economic impact of non-competitive activity within the city. How many bikes are sold in Calgary in a year? Something like 50,000.
Yeah.
Per year.
Wow.
So, like people are buying the product, they're not getting out, but huge uptake on people want to be active, and our marketing is so important to get it out there to get people active.
So I sort of allocated 2 hours, and I expect most people are sort of kind of full up a little bit right now. So I think, let me say, I think we're saying we want, first of all, to decide what is it we want, like what is it we're really talking about, this outdoor active model. And I think for that's what are the philosophical guidelines around it, what is it supposed to achieve, what is its heart, what is its almost like its ethical heart. that sounds like a good topic for a next meeting to thrash that out and put that down on paper as some sort of vision statements are usually 6 minutes long. I think we're going to need a set of points a little bit longer than just a vision statement. Does that seem like maybe the next place that you need to go?
I'd suggest, based on this conversation, you rough out something before the next, because we will be back to the same discussion next time. So.
Sure. So I've got, did everyone write their email address down in the book that went around? Anyone didn't? If they can add it in. I don't need yours because I know where to find you. I've been asked by a number of people who weren't able to attend, and one reason we've recorded the meeting is so they can have access to that if they want. But a lot of people won't want to sit through 2 hours of video and blurred voices. So I'll put together some notes that cover the conversation we had afterwards. And I think one thing we can do around that is set up a discussion board on the Outdoor Council of Canada website where people can say, no, that's not what I said, or that's not what I heard, or I think you missed this. Would be a good place to start. Maybe does that sound reasonable? Mm-hmm. And then to set a meeting in the fall, and typically I think for a lot of us it's real busy when school goes back in, but maybe around about the 3rd week of September our waterhead sort of starts to come above water. Does that sound like a reasonable time that we might arrange another meeting, have some people who weren't here, give them the opportunity to come to and have a second meeting? Is that people into that?
I would aim for the 4th week of September because everybody else is already aiming for the 3rd week, which means that.
So I picked a Tuesday night because it fit my schedule, which is also really crowded. But what night of the week is Tuesday a fine night, or in September? Is that going to work for people as good as any other night? Okay, so we'll just do Tuesday again and close to the end of September, maybe the last Tuesday in September or something like that. Sound good?
I got a question. If we're going to align with the City of Calgary and the new plan that's coming, are there key steps that we need to make sure we respect, like deadlines and things like that?
Yeah, so Catherine would be more informed than I, but I don't think we have to have a finished product rolled out. I think we just need to make sure that the other players at the table know what we're doing, that they and that the space is made for us to do what we need to do. And I think that's really the bit that needs to go in the policy is, and hopefully that won't be controversial to move forward.
And would it be possible by next meeting to have an overview of those steps or the dates and whatnot?
My belief is that by the time we have our next meeting, it would be about the time that Calgary will release. So there's been one initial set of documents come out, so they've had a bunch of input meetings. Now there's going to be what the summary from those meetings is going to be released about the same time as our meeting, so we could add to that agenda, okay, this is where we're at with the sport policy. What do we need to, in the next round of input, say is right or wrong about where sport policy is going right now? So I think, does that sound make sense to you, Catherine?
It does, but I think you really need to let them know that you want to be on the table. I don't think you wait till then to bring it up. I think you talk to Kyle, who's the new Kurt, who's and just let them know that this is an important thing that you want to be considered and at least on the table when the discussion and at the table when the discussion is happening.
Okay, so I was going to try and track down Perry and back him into a corner. Who's Kyle? Sorry,
Kyle is Kurt Hansen's replacement.
He's the new Kurt Hansen.
Yeah. Kurt Hansen's the GM overseeing recreation and all of those.
Okay.
So
can you send me his email? Because I find getting emails from employees is really hard. They hide.
Yeah, I can send it. Yeah.
So would there be value then in having some kind of a written statement endorsed by people around the table saying we want to be at the city table? Like, is that a type of document that would be valuable?
I don't think we need to do that. I think
just like an intention, a letter of intent that we're meeting
Yeah, I mean, if there's like the name of how many organizations are here around this table, so the name of those many organizations telling the city, hey, we want to discuss with you, I feel that might have some weight. I don't know.
I mean, there's obviously strength in numbers, and particularly when there's such a variety of groups around the table, it certainly wouldn't hurt.
Okay, so I know sometimes it's a name is useful. Can we put together a quick working name for this group? Something like, I don't know.
Add network to the end of it.
The which?
Something network.
Sure.
Outdoor active
Outdoor,
life network.
yeah, outdoor for life.
Outdoor council.
I don't think this, I think Outdoor Council wants to be involved. We don't have to own this process or this committee.
Or outdoor.
Yeah, Calgary Outdoor for Life Network. There you
Oh, outdoor literacy, it might be the Calgary Outdoor Literacy Network.
Literacy is a confusing thing.
Sorry?
I think the word literacy,
Yeah.
we don't know what that means.
It's got a whole new.
But they do.
Yeah,
they do.
They do, so it's a provisional name that we can change later.
It's a big, like, it is where, if you get onto that, that's a sweet spot.
Oh,
Like telling them we know what it is we're doing in their language. So I agree what you're saying. Like if I was to be talking to the public, I wouldn't use the word outdoor literacy because it's like, and that's why I taught for a long time because I really urge you to, that there's an international, if you're not familiar with the outdoor literacy thing, there's a website, the International Outdoor Literacy Organization based in Britain. There's a book by Margaret Whitehead. Read the first 2 or 3 chapters. It's dense, like it's philosophy. Don't think it's easy to read, but if you can read philosophy, it's really interesting. And I think it's actually really important stuff. But whether or not, I don't know, maybe Catherine's got some lighter reading on outdoor literacy.
Active for Life has some excellent.
Active for Life. Okay, so the Active for Life network is a place to look on about outdoor literacy. So there's also incidentally a Canadian statement on outdoor literacy, although I'm a little bit, it's got the main points, but it won't educate much more.
Calgary Outdoor Literacy.
Network.
What does that spell? Yeah.
Calm.
Okay, that's better than some of the other ones. I was in a meeting where we walked away with the thing and then we all spelled it as we were walking out the door. We're like, ooh.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Right, thank you.
So will you send out a follow-up, perhaps with a link to some of the information?
Yeah, so it'll be next week because I'm already off on another trip here. But it'll be next week.
But there will be some follow-up information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Actually, I'll give you that.
Thank you. You never got your chance, sorry.
That's all right. These things happen. It was the most interesting.
Good.
I'm glad I came.
Thanks, Catherine. Oh, you're still there. I'm about to cut you off here now.
Okay. Well, enjoy the
Snowmaking.
dry hills,
Great.
the red hills.
There's your pen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How to shut this down.
Oh, boy. You should watch the last one. How do you get it? They see you again, Kevin.